All right, the interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. The veteran's name is John Clark Kuppinger. He was born on August 23rd, 1983. He served in Operation Enduring Freedom Afghanistan, 2005 to 2006 and 2010 to 2011. He's achieved the rank of Sergeant. We're recording this on the 25th of April, 2013. I am Jeff Fulton and I'm conducting the interview. I have no relation. All right, John, where and when were you born?
August 23rd, 1983, San Antonio, Texas.
Okay. So you're now in South Carolina. What brought you from Texas to South Carolina?
We moved to Charlotte, North Carolina when I was 6 or 7, and I spent most of my life there until I graduated high school, at which time I started attending Clemson University for school. And that's really how I got down to South Carolina.
Okay. What about your parents' occupations? What do your parents do?
My dad, he was a banker growing up, and now he's in IT support. And my mom, she is actually back into counseling. She was always a EAP counselor, and she took a break for a little while, and she's back into counseling.
Okay. What about your siblings?
My brother is attending school at UNC Charlotte, and he should be graduating by August, I think.
Nice. What were you doing before you joined the Army?
I was going to Clemson. I was in ROTC. So that kind of got me on my whole military track, because there was this program that if you were in ROTC and you joined the reserves, you could basically do both at the same time. So it was a way to make money. I figured I was going to make the military a career anyway, so might as well just go ahead and get basic training out of the way and go from there.
Do you have any other family members who have been in the military?
Not close family members. I've got my grandpa. He was a doctor in the Navy. My uncle was a doctor in the Navy also, and one of my cousins is a doctor in the Air Force.
So why did you choose the Army instead of the Navy or the Air Force?
I had it in my mind at this time. I think I was 20, that I wanted to do something more hands-on or more exciting, and I didn't think I could get that experience in the Air Force or the Navy.
Okay. So when did you actually join the Army?
I joined the Army September 9th, 2003.
Okay, so how did September 11th play into your role as far as wanting to go into the military?
That was a huge factor. That was, I remember September 11th, and I remember saying to one of my friends that day that we're going to go get them being the terrorists, and I knew it was a huge day. I didn't foresee how it would affect my future at that time, but I knew it was huge, and I think that largely inspired me to join the military, duty for the country.
And where were you actually on September 11th, 2001?
I was in English class in high school. A kid ran into the classroom and shouted I think at that point it was just the first plane had crashed into the first tower and ran out, and everyone's looking at each other like, is this some kind of joke? And one of the girls in the class starts breaking down crying because her dad was on a plane to New York City that day. And my teacher was actually a Navy veteran. He didn't take too kindly to that at all. He brought the kid back into the classroom and chewed him out for all that. And then we're switching classes, and my next class is a religion class, and we're sitting in there. The TV's on to CNN, and we actually, I thought it was a replay of the first plane, and it was actually the second plane hitting Tower 2. So that was a pretty big moment there.
So that was your senior year of high school?
Yep.
And so when you actually started going to Clemson, that's when you joined ROTC that first semester?
I did.
And because you kind of saw that path of wanting to go military at that point?
Yeah, we didn't, being a Catholic, it was a Catholic high school that I was going to. We didn't have any ROTC program, anything like that. I had done some Civil Air Patrol prior, but going to Clemson was my first opportunity to do anything military related. And ROTC, it was a class, and it was in the area that I wanted to go in, or I thought I would want to go in, and so I signed up, and it was a good experience.
Was the Army, the reason why you chose the Army, you said was for more hands-on, but was September 11th pretty much the sole motivator for you to go military or go Army?
There was other considerations. College, being able to pay for school was a factor. I won't say it was the biggest factor. I thought at that point I may want to go into law enforcement too, and that, as it turned out, is actually where I ended up. But either way, I felt like military and ROTC and Army in particular could help me achieve those goals of law enforcement, paying for school, and being able to do hands-on work and something I could tell people about years down the road.
So when you joined the Army and then you went down and did your the MEPS training, went down to MEPS to figure out what job you did.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have to do any pre-test going into that?
I took the ASVAB at MEPS, and I didn't know how well I did. They were like, yeah, you maxed it, which I got a 99. I now know that was a high score, and if I had done active duty full-time, I could have gone into pretty much any job I wanted, which I was looking at the reserves, so my job options were limited. But I kind of rushed into choosing my job, so to speak, because I just had a list of a few jobs. They advertise, 199 jobs in the Army, but I got a list of 5 jobs. And it was like carpenter, plumber, chemical unit, and combat engineer. And I was like, show me the video for combat engineer. They showed me a video of a guy throwing a satchel charge in a bunker and it blowing up, and I was like, that looks like fun. I'm gonna do that.
So they got you with the video?
Yeah, pretty much.
Nice. So when you, after MAPS, you actually went to your basic training and your AIT. Did you do that all at one time?
Yeah, I did OSUT, the one station unit training. I took spring semester off from Clemson to go. Showed up to Fort Leonard Wood probably the 2nd or 3rd week of January. It's fairly cold, but after that first night there, it just starts pouring snow, and it's a situation of I'm really like, I don't know what I've gotten myself into, but I hope it works out.
What were some of the emotions that you were going through mentally on as far as the new experience?
Nervous, definitely a lot of nerves. I mean, I didn't know when the yelling would start. I mean, you have this idea in your head of what basic is going to be like, just from seeing it in the movies, but you still don't know, having never been there. I still remember the initial bus ride onto the base. Everyone's laughing and joking, and as soon as we pull up to those gates, it's dead silence from there on until we get to the reception barracks.
So did that help play kind of like setting the tone of what you were getting yourself into?
Yeah, it was a very much a real, this is real moment. I mean, looking back, I can laugh at it now, but at the time I was 20. I had no idea what I'd signed up for, and I'm like, I just want to go home.
You have been in the Army Reserves for about 10 years, is that right?
Yep.
And you chose the Reserves so that way you could do the school at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the other feelings or maybe obstacles you had to overcome when you were actually there at basic training?
I mean, you have the, I mean, I'd been at college for 1.5 years, so I'd been living out on my own, but still, I mean, you're separated from family and friends, and I mean, you're making new friends while you're there, but those first couple days, it's, you barely know anyone. It's very disorienting, I mean, very confusing time. I mean, so you're not quite sure what to expect, what's coming up. You just don't know that if you can handle it at that point, because you don't know, you haven't been tested yet, so to speak.
What was maybe one of the funnest things that you remember doing when you were actually at basic training?
I'd have to say the ropes course, the obstacle course. I mean, I hated it every single time, mostly because the section where you have to run with your gas mask on, I could never breathe. And then I found out later people weren't actually stealing their gas masks so they could still breathe. And I was like, I should have thought of that. But it was probably, it's like everything you see in the movies, the rope swing, crawling, doing the commando crawl over the single rope bridge, climbing the rope netting. I mean, it's what you think of when you think of basic training, and it was physically challenging. But by I can't remember, second or third time we went there, it wasn't, can I do this? It's all right. I know I can do this. Let's get it done. Let's do it so we can get back to the barracks.
Okay, so basic training, then you went straight into AIT. What were some of the things that was a challenge for you going from one straight into the next?
It wasn't too much of a challenge. It was basically just, I'm glad we did it the way we did. The biggest thing I think was there's a little bit of downtime from the people who are only doing basic. I take that back. There may not have been much downtime because of the timing of our basic training. It wasn't like there was high school kids coming in just to do basic. It was January. We started in mid-January, so we were graduated by last week of April. So we basically went straight through. There may have been 1 or 2 days downtime, but there was no challenges. Just a continuation of what we already been going through.
And with Combat Engineer, what was one of the funnest things that you did at AIT?
Oh, explosives, definitely. I mean, first time you hear that M81 pop, and then boom, it's something you don't forget.
Now, from basic training and AIT, walk me through the next 1.5 to 2 years until you actually deployed your first time, as far as the training back at your reserve unit.
Well, I literally get home from AIT, and next day I call the unit to find out when do I report, what's going on for the next drill. and they tell me over the phone, "You know we're deploying, right?" And I told them, "No, Sergeant, I didn't know that. I just got out of training." So that was a heck of a way to find out about your first deployment. But we actually had 2 weeks of training in June. I don't think I had to go to the May drill because of just coming out of basic, but I think I went to the 2 weeks of training in June where I met everyone in the platoon and kind of just started getting settled in. To be honest, I can't really remember too well that year. It's kind of a blur. I do remember they told us we were going to be in Afghanistan by October, and that fell through. And we didn't go to Fort Bragg for training for our mobilization until February of 2005. So it was just the time in between was normal drills, doing some driver's training, some weapons qual, nothing too crazy though.
And you went to Fort Bragg for mobilization. How long were you actually at Fort Bragg?
I think we were in Afghanistan by mid-April. I want to say, because it might have been early April. I know we were the advanced party going over, so we left ahead of everyone else, which wasn't that big of a deal. I think they told us we'd get to come home early, and that ended up not being true at all. But as it was, we got over there, we got settled in, we got some free time away from the higher ups, so it was actually pretty good in the end.
Now, you're 21 at this point? How old were you when you first deployed?
I was 21.
So as a young adult, how did that affect you going over to Afghanistan? I know you had been through serious training, but now you're actually having to apply it. How did that affect with maybe your mentality when you went over?
I mean, it was very real, I guess. I 1 year before I was complaining about quizzes and term papers, and next year I'm on guard tower or clearing a minefield, looking for landmines. So it was something that it was a lot more serious, but I just looked at it as a job. Still had time for fun, watched movies, goofed off. I mean, I don't know if it changed me too much. I think it probably did, but I can't remember there being any particular moment except maybe when we're first there and the first rocket attack comes in and alarms are going off and we're like, what the hell? This is real.
How many days being in Afghanistan were you there before that first rocket hit?
Can't remember. I think that was the first night. I mean, we were on ground. Actually, I know it was because we were still adjusting to the sleep schedule, and I think it was because we were wide awake and it was middle of the night. I forget what they called it. They were on Zulu time, so it said it was like something. I forget if it said it was like 2300, but it was actually 02. It's crazy what they do with, or when we were there that time, it was crazy what they did with the time zones. But I know it was middle of the night because we had to run to the dang bunker and get our gear on. And I remember shaking Sutherland, telling him we had to go, and he was confused as all get out. He had no idea what was going on. He actually managed to fall asleep.
During that first tour, how many rocket attacks did you actually encounter?
I can't remember the exact number. It was half a dozen maybe. I mean, it wasn't, knowing from my second tour over there what we went through, it really wasn't anything. That first time it seemed like a lot, but I mean, the first tour was really, I mean, it wasn't cake, but compared to the second tour, it kind of was, because we were mostly on Bagram. We had a dangerous job. We were looking for landmines, so that doesn't take away from it. But we were inside the wire looking for landmines. We didn't have to necessarily worry about complex ambushes, but I don't know. I remember being out in Oregon E and getting rocketed out there. That was a little bit crazier, because I mean, we were in concrete bunkers already to sleep, and they made us leave these concrete bunkers to go to another concrete bunker, because it's the bunker. You go to the bunker. I mean, it seemed a little ridiculous, but it was what it was.
What was the primary job as a combat engineer on your first tour? You said demining. Could you expand on that a little bit?
We were clearing a section of Bagram for them to create a new entry control point for the base, which I got to see on the second deployment. So that was kind of well, I'm glad they put it to good use, the work we did the first deployment.
Made it feel like you had a fulfillment.
Yeah, it was definitely good to see that it wasn't a total waste. But we were looking to clear the ground so the construction guys could go in and safely build this entry control point without having to worry about UXO or landmines or anything like that. We did that on Bagram, and we did some other clearance operations around the base, but it wasn't too much. I mean, they had civilian contractors who were doing a lot more, and actually in heavily mined areas where they actually had the old Russian mine signs up. We never went into those, but we also did security operations, guard tower. We did convoy operations, taking supplies to other bases. That was probably one of the more interesting parts. Just got to get outside the wire and see the country.
Just to backtrack for a second, when you did the demining, did you use just the minesweepers, or did you work with the dogs, or do you have any robotics? Or
we used actually a little bit of all of that. We used the AN-PSS-14 mine detector. It uses the metal detector plus the ground penetrating radar to tell you if something might be under there. Pretty high-tech piece of equipment and expensive, but that was pretty cool. But we did that. We'd work with a buddy who would be the prober, so one of us would go out there, sweep until we found something. We'd mark it, because this metal detector is sticking probably 3 or 4 feet off from your arm, so you can't exactly just raise it up and start digging in the ground safely. So that's why you work in pairs. Plus, it takes the strain off each of you. You get a break while the other one works, because it's 120 degrees out there while you're doing all this in battle rattle in your body armor and helmet and everything. So then your prober will go out there, see if there's anything to it. Normally, I think we mostly found bullets. In my experience, I think someone may have found a rocket one time, but that was about it. We also worked with the mine dogs. Those were great assets. They could clear a lot of ground very quickly. And they also mostly found bullets, which it's crazy to me that they can find a little tiny bullet, 30 years after the Russians left. But they're that good. We used robots called Dokins. They were remote controlled flails that you actually used a PlayStation controller to control, so that was actually kind of good for the younger guys because we all grew up on Xbox and PlayStations. I mean, we knew how to control it instinctively. But those would be good. Those were, I think I actually hit a toe popper, I think, with it one time. So they did their job, kept us safe. A lot of maintenance, but very effective tools.
When you say toe popper, you're talking about anti-personnel?
Yeah, anti-personnel mine, mainly designed to take a foot off, cause obviously mental and physical injuries to the soldier and his comrades. Not necessarily going to kill him, although it could, but they had a variety. The Russians had all kinds, butterfly mines we called them, but it could have been something else too. You'll never know for sure because all you see is the explosion, but based on the size and the fact it only took one flail off, we were pretty sure that was a toe popper mine.
And then, so those are the operations you did at Bagram.
Mm-hmm.
So you were talking about convoying to do resupply.
Mm-hmm.
How was that as an experience? Obviously, you got to see the country.
Yeah, it was different. It was probably the best mission we did because got to leave the wire. People would generally leave you alone when you got to wherever you were going because you were only going to be there for a day or so. Plus, you weren't assigned to anyone at the base you were going to resupply, so they don't mess with you, try to give you details, other stuff that you feel like is a waste of your time as a soldier, but someone's got to do it. Just you don't want to be that someone to do it. So we got to go out to see a bunch of different bases, see the locals, threw candy to the kids. At that time, they were receptive to us. They would line up whenever they saw our convoys coming through because they know they would get free stuff from the soldiers, water, candy, food.
What were some of the special missions or unique missions that maybe you did when you were over there that first time?
We went down to base in Jalalabad. We did some clearance operations down there. It wasn't anything too, not that it wasn't too serious, but it wasn't anything too major. We weren't clearing huge parts of the ground. We had little areas that we're going into. I think someone did find a cache of toe popper mines that we ended up having to call EOD in for. So that was one of them.
I remember hearing about the elections going on, the Afghanistan elections starting back up while the U.S. forces were there.
Yeah, I do remember the elections because I actually I had gone on leave in August, and my platoon and my squad we were set up into 3 squads. My platoon and my squad were all still on Bagram when I left. When I come back, my squad is down in Oregon E, what we call the OE, and they're sending the rest of the company down there to provide security for these elections because they think Taliban's going to try to disrupt it with attacks on the U.S. or what have you. So I get down there and get flown by Chinook down to OE, and I join up with my squad, and we're working with Bravo Company on security for road construction. So the rest of the company was doing security, and the rest of the platoon was doing security at the base for the elections, and I was out running with our Humvees and providing security for horizontal construction unit to build a road between Oregon E and can't remember the name of that base. It's a big one now because I know it's got a airfield for a C-130 to land, which, I mean, it's crazy when I got there the second time to look back and look at these bases where we had been before and see how much they've expanded since we were there. But it was good. It kept us busy. It was a lot of long days though, 14, 16-hour days.
What was your longest day doing that at that time? Do you remember?
It was probably 6. We stayed out overnight. We got to sleep in shifts, but what they were doing is they were running the ballots from the elections back to Kabul, and we had to set up a security at a little, called it a truck stop, but it was a little group of civilian buildings at this intersection. Not enough to call a town, but they had to set up security there for when the ballots came through, and we had to stay out there overnight because the ballots were supposedly coming through at 8 in the morning, and they would have fighters following them in. And what we did was we stayed out there overnight, and we didn't go back to the base. We just went back to providing security for the horizontal construction. So it's basically 2 days of missions with camping out overnight. So technically that was our longest mission, but we got some sleep. It wasn't great sleep, and we ate locals' food instead of MREs. So at that time they were pretty receptive to us. So they sold us some they cooked up some a stew of some sorts and fed us, and we had chai tea, and it was actually really good. And I know you're not supposed to eat food from the locals in a third world country, but honestly at that point we didn't care.
It's a little bit of survival at the same time.
Yeah, MREs are not, they'll keep you alive, but they won't make you happy.
Was there anything else in that first tour that stood out to you?
Trying to think. I mean, I felt like we were actually doing good in Afghanistan at that time. I felt like, you know, kids smiling, waving, adults, they might not smile and wave, but they're not throwing rocks and rioting all the time. There was a few riots, mainly related, I think there was something about a cartoon, a Denmark cartoon at the time that had guys have to post security on the front gate at Bagram because there was a riot. But overall, it wasn't too bad. It wasn't too hostile to Americans, I should say.
So you got back when? When did the tour end?
We got back in country, back in the States, April 2006.
And then you went back to Clemson that next fall?
Yeah. Actually moved into Clemson that May or June, I think it was, and enrolled in classes for the fall semester, and I won't say picked up right where I left off, but I mean I got back into school and started going to classes again, so it was a good experience. I had some roommates I deployed with, so it wasn't like it was with most reserve units where once you get back from overseas you all split and take your separate ways.
So you went back to being a reservist 100% of the time, just doing your 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer.
Right.
You did that while you were going to class?
Yep. It wasn't too difficult at that time because I didn't have a full-time job. I think I worked a few part-time jobs here and there, but my weekends were always free, so it wasn't a big deal at that time to do 1 week a month and 2 weeks in the summer. And the reserves say that, you know, school shouldn't be an excuse to get out of AT, but there's a reason they do AT in the summer. I mean, they know they have a lot of college students.
How was it going? So you joined the Army after you had started school. Now you have gone overseas. You have experienced life, as you could say, and then you came back. How did that affect you in the classroom, going back with a little bit of insight of the world?
I was a much better student. After doing 12 hours of guard duty, it's nothing to do a 3-page paper in an hour. So there's a disconnect between me and some of the students and my classmates, but part of that may have been age. I was taking a lot of general ed requirement classes that there was a lot of freshmen in, and at this point I'm 22 and did 13 months overseas. I don't have a lot of, at that time I didn't have a lot of respect for these students and their complaints. I felt a lot of them were complaining way too much when all they should have been doing was suck it up and drive on.
Bringing that Army mentality into the classroom.
I was a much better student. I think I even made Dean's List that first semester back, and my grades improved, and I was a better student. I was having fun, and it was overall a much better experience.
When did you actually graduate from Clemson?
December 2009.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So during that time frame, did you do any training between your first tour and your second tour that was very significant?
I went to IOCA training, explosive ordnance clearance agent. It was taught by EOD at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. So I got to go back to the base where I had such a bad experience with basic training the first time and see it in a new light. I had a couple years experience. I was higher rank. I wasn't basic training private, and then I got to go to a school that's one of the most intellectually demanding that I think the Army can offer. EOD EOD is a bunch of, they're very smart, and obviously they have to be to do what they do. It's just so different with all the other schools you see in the Army being taught to the lowest common denominator to come into this class that's being taught at its level, and you have to make that standard. They're not teaching it to the lowest common denominator because that'll get you killed. So it was a challenging course, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And that ended up playing a huge part in my second deployment because as EOCA, I was basically our platoon's expert as far as identifying IEDs and figuring out if we could blow them in place or BIP them. That ended up saving us a lot of time, preventing us from having to call out EOD, whose response times can, vary. I mean, you're looking at least 3 hours for them to get on scene if you have to call EOD. So down the road, it ended up paying off huge on that second deployment.
And when did you actually deploy on your second tour?
Let's see. We did a couple weeks I think it was 6 weeks of pre-mobilization training starting in late January or early February of 2010. We came back from that early March, and we actually mobilized officially towards third week of March, I think. And after mobilization, we deployed the first week of June to Afghanistan, flew into Kyrgyzstan for the second time, well, third time really at that point, because we'd flown in there the first deployment, flown in there when we were coming back, and so this is my third time to Kyrgyzstan. So that base is, we always enjoyed that one. Just, it's not technically garrison, but it's where you can relax because you're not in Afghanistan. You don't have the threat of IEDs or suicide bombers hanging directly over your head. So.
And then from Kyrgyzstan, you flew into Afghanistan?
Yep, we flew into Kandahar, I believe. Yeah, we flew into Kandahar. Hadn't been to Kandahar on the first deployment, so that was interesting. And the first thing you notice getting off that plane is the smell. They call it Stinky Pond for a reason, and it's you can tell why as soon as you get off the plane. That was, and my first thought, honestly, besides the smell getting off the plane, was, well, let's get back to it. You know, it's like, I know there was a bunch of new kids there, first time over there. They don't know what's going on. In my mind, being my second time, I was like, well, let's just figure out where we're going, bunk for the night, and then figure out what we're going to do and where we're going to do it.
Now, your first tour, you were, what rank were you?
I started off PFC, and I think at Mobilization I got specialist.
And your second tour, you were
a sergeant.
So having that added responsibility and that added rank, did that play a different role when you were actually over your second tour?
I was definitely thinking a lot more about my guys. Before, when you're lower rank, you're only thinking really about yourself, because all you have to do is take care of yourself. You be where you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be there, in the right uniform. As a team leader, you be where you're supposed to be, and your team is there, or you know where your team is. And that's the biggest thing, is keeping track of where everyone's going. They all want to go get drinks or go to the PX or whatever, but you have to know where they're at in case a rocket comes in, and you have to get accountability. So that's something that weighs a lot more on you when you're in a position of responsibility.
What was your biggest challenge when you were over your second tour?
Probably managing my team, as well as managing my own duties as communications and EOCA. So I was responsible for my EOCA responsibilities, maintaining our demo bag, our C4, and the associated items with that. I also had to make sure our communications would work, so I had to try to figure out how to get our radios filled and what channels we'd be on, what security we were using. That was probably the biggest challenge, was because we'd have different types of radios, and not everything was in top condition, and things would break all the time, and you'd get orders from higher up saying you're going to stop using this type of security and use this other type of security, and you have to, you're dealing with so much over there. I mean, you're getting hounded from all directions, from your soldiers below you complaining, to your superiors above you complaining, to some guy who's not even in your platoon or company complaining about you or your soldiers. I mean, you have to be on guard 24/7, not just from the enemy, but from other soldiers.
You said your first tour was pretty much a cakewalk compared to your second one. What did you mean by that?
Well, I wasn't there for this mission, but we get into Afghanistan in early June, and we get sent out to Jalalabad to relieve a unit in place, what they call RIP, relief in place. So we start learning our job from the guys who are doing our job, and then we'll gradually take over more and more of the job, so there's theoretically no drop-off in the level of competency when the other unit is gone. During that time, I've been sent to Bagram to go to a BIP class, so I can be certified that I can blow up IEDs in country, that I know what the theater policies are. I already know what EOCA policies are, but theater can put additional policies on what can or can't be blown up based on the needs of the theater and the type of tactical environment you're looking at there. So while I'm there at BIP class, our platoon's out already running a mission for a major operation. I can't remember what it was called. I just remember the place. I think it was called Dam. And when I'm coming back, I'm talking on Facebook to someone in a private message, and I know it's Facebook and everything, and they just tell me that the platoon's gone black on ammo on a mission, and there's someone's been injured or possibly killed, and that's all they could tell me. And I'm like, well, shit, this is completely different. I mean, we had that one rocket come in on the first night of our first deployment. This battle, as it turned out to be, ended up, I think 5 or 6 infantry guys got silver stars. Vehicles got shot up, and it was just if anything, it was good from our perspective, from my perspective, in that it was, yeah, you're back somewhere familiar, you recognize some of these places, but it's not the same. It was definitely a wake-up call as far as the tactical environment.
Do you think that helped set the tempo for you mentally for the rest of your tour?
I think it did. You look at that and you're like, well, not every mission is going to be a dare damn, but you need to think about the possibility of what if it is. You don't choose. In our job, you don't get to choose the time and place that you engage the enemy. They're choosing it. You have to be able to respond. So it was good wake up call to keep you on your toes. It definitely set the tone.
For your first tour, you did a lot of manual demining and then you worked with the mine dogs. The second tour, did you do the same thing, or did you do something completely different?
We had vehicles we used the second time. We had Huskies that we used. They're basically vehicular metal detectors, and there's some other technology added onto them that can help find IEDs. I was in a Buffalo pretty much the entire deployment, and that has a big arm on the vehicle, so we can poke at suspicious mounds of dirt or trash and see if there's anything out there. And so that was primarily my job, was being the vehicle commander of the Buffalo, and also operating the Buffalo arm, because we figured the way we looked at it was, if I'm going to have to identify whether or not this is an IED, I need to be able to see if it's an IED or not. So it just made the most sense to put me in the Buffalo. As it turned out, I mean, we didn't have a gunner or a crow system on our vehicle, which is a remote operated weapon system. So we didn't have any way of shooting back at the enemy. So that was something that kind of was a downside, being a giant rolling target. We got shot at numerous times with RPGs. It's the biggest target. You're going to draw the most fire, but being able to have at least someone shoot back would have been nice. And
by finding the roadside bombs, the IEDs, your job was route clearance. Is that right?
That's correct. We were route clearance looking for IEDs. The IED threat between 2005 and 2010 was completely different. It was starting in 2006 when we were there, but it wasn't at the levels that it was in Iraq at that time. And it definitely wasn't at the levels that it was when we were there in 2010. I think the summer, we were actually part of the surge to Afghanistan that the president ordered, and we were there during one of the heaviest times for activity, as far as I remember. I couldn't tell you numbers, but I just know it was a huge amount of IEDs and complex ambushes and all sorts of things going on.
Now, being EOCA and being BIP certified for the platoon, how many IEDs did you actually, if you remember, how many IEDs did you actually blow up to help save lives?
I think personally I was responsible for 13 IEDs or IED components, because we did I remember one time we had just blown off, well, we didn't just blow off, I was interrogating with the buffalo arm, and my driver is looking in front of the vehicle, and there's a huge engine block, so it's hard to see from the commander's position over the engine block, but the driver had a little bit better view. He could see that when I was scraping with the arm that something was getting pulled up, and just as he says stop, it goes off. It was an IED, and we found that obviously the buffalo arm was disabled, couldn't work after that, obviously, so it did its job. But while we're looking around following the blast, we see another bag off to the side of the vehicle. It's kind of suspicious because, I mean, the IED just went off, and it looks like fertilizer or something of that sort. Basically, long story short, we come back out there and put C4 on it and watch it go up, and it's a much bigger blast than what just a C4 by itself would have been, so it initiated something else. So that was part of it, part of the 13. I think as a platoon we found something like 22 IEDs, plus I don't even remember all the ambushes, mortars, indirect fire that we took, RPGs. I mean, it was a lot of contact. I think after the deployment, or when we were getting ready to come home, we were getting actually tested by doctors because they said we were in the top 2%. Our company was in the top 2% of units in country that had seen contact, and they wanted to check our balance, see, I guess, for diagnostics, see how it would affect us physically.
Was there ever a time when you were over there getting ambushed that you thought it could be your time?
I mean, there was one ambush that we took a RPG to the side of the buffalo, and then we also took machine gun fire, and the bullets actually made an outline of my head in the glass, and fortunately that's really thick bulletproof glass, but I just looked at that and I couldn't even comprehend it at first. I wasn't sure if it was you know, an IED had gone off or what. All of a sudden the glass was shattered, and looking back on that would have been it, you know, that would have been quick. I mean, that's about all you can say. But I mean, that mission right there, that sucked. Mainly not being able to yell at my gunner to start shooting. But you know, being defenseless is probably the biggest pet peeve I had of that situation. Being able to blow up IEDs, at least I could control that somewhat, but not being able to shoot back, that being helpless is not a position you want to be in.
How did your guys take it for those types of encounters, I guess?
They seemed to handle it fairly well. From what I remember, they listened pretty good. I don't think I ever had anyone tell me one of my guys freaked out, because my team wasn't in the same vehicle as me. You have to fill up where you can. So my team might have, you know, they might all be drivers, for example, and so they'd each be in a different vehicle. I never heard a report from anyone else that they weren't doing their job or couldn't do their job. Mentally, they all seemed to be okay. I mean, it's hard to tell over there. You don't have a lot of time for figuring things out, and you really can't examine what just happened right then and there. Some of that stuff has to wait till you're home, unfortunately. But
And when did you actually come back from your second tour?
I would say we were back March 2011.
And with it being a higher tempo, a lot more action scene, do you think you came back as more of a changed person than your first tour?
Maybe I'm still trying to sort that one out. I think when I came home this time, I had already graduated Clemson, so I knew I had to get a job. And I'd already, before graduating, I had started applying at law enforcement agencies. So I already had a job lined up for when I got back. I had a plan. I feel like the second time I was actually a lot more organized coming home and a lot more productive. And I took a month off, called the agency where I work at, and let them know I was ready to continue the hiring process. They said, "Great, come in." So it gave me a lot of direction when I got home, which was good because after this deployment, I think the first deployment, having a couple buddies to be roommates with, that gave me a support system. This time I wouldn't have had that support system. So having a purpose and having a job and, going to the police academy, that gave me direction that let me get through any post-deployment issues a lot better because I talked with doctors about this before we left the country, but if you don't have a plan, if you don't have a support system, you're at a higher risk for some of the mental issues that soldiers are facing because, quite frankly, no one else knows what you went through. So if you let yourself feel lost and don't have a plan to deal with it, you're going to be at a higher risk for some of these problems. So I feel like this time I did exactly what I needed to deal emotionally with the deployment.
Do you still stay in contact with the guys you went overseas with?
For the guys who are still in a reserve unit, yeah. We've had some guys drop off, so to speak, and they have personal problems. And due to my position in law enforcement, one of them in particular I did come in contact with, but I actually ended up arresting one of my own soldiers. So that was unfortunate, but the thing I told him was, look, at least it's me and not someone else. I'll treat you like a person, So it sucks to be in a situation like that, but and some of our guys were cross-leveled from a unit in Tennessee, and you don't get to see them or other units. There's guys from Ohio, and it sucks that they're not around because there's some really good guys, but there's still Facebook, so see things from them every once in a while.
How do you think your experiences overseas have affected you as a person? Or has it made you appreciate things more because of your experiences?
It definitely makes me appreciate the civilian life a lot more. It's hard being a soldier. The things you're asked to do, the dedication, the 24/7 being on the job, 365, even Christmas Day you don't get off. A lot of that, even being in law enforcement, it's similar in that I could be expected to work holidays or nights or something I don't want to do, but it's still not as intense as being a soldier in a combat zone. So it's definitely made me appreciate the home life a lot more. As far as changing me, it's hard to say. I probably won't know that for a couple of years.
Did you have any life lessons that you've learned through your military experience?
I think I can deal with pressure at work a lot better. because of the experiences I've been through. And that's not even in law enforcement. That's not dealing with pressure from the situations that come up. That's dealing with normal work stuff, like your boss wants you to get this done, or you gotta get this report typed up and submitted, and got a spell check. I mean, I can deal with the day-to-day stuff of work a lot better. And the situations that aren't day-to-day, the craziness, I mean, I've been in some craziness, so when that stuff comes out, I feel, you know, I've seen this before, even if I haven't seen the situation. I know the adrenaline rush, so I'm ready for it.
And you have been in for about 10 years. Your contract ends in a little more than 2 years. Is that how it works?
Correct. I re-enlisted, and I'll be out after my second 6 years. So I re-enlisted at the 6-year mark, and my second 6 years will be up in 2015. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So from here until the end of your contract, you're just going to keep fulfilling your reserve 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer.
That's the plan. I'll do what they need me to do. However, I've decided I'm not going to re-enlist. It's a hard decision to make, especially when you look at the retirement. But I've got a civilian job that I love, and I've got a fiance and a dog I've got to take care of. So I got more responsibilities now than when I was just a college student. And it's true what they say, that being a soldier is a single man's job.
Well, thank you for the interview. I just want to thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.